Experiment number 2, Observation and Experiment. This video is meant to summarize the procedures and the modifications to the procedures for this experiment. When three substances, solid calcium chloride, solid sodium bicarbonate, and a solution of phenol red in water are mixed in a closed container, a complex series of changes is observed. Observations include temperature changes, color changes, and changes in state. How can we learn more about the individual interactions responsible for each observation? Imagine that each substance in the mixture represents a variable. By changing only one variable at a time, it should be possible to determine the contribution of each substance to the changes observed for the overall reaction. The three substances that are used in this experiment are all common chemicals. Sodium bicarbonate, or baking soda, is used as a food additive in baking. It is also used as a natural deodorant to absorb and remove odor-causing chemicals in refrigerators and carpets. Calcium chloride, road salt, is a salt-like compound that is used as a de-icer for sidewalks and roads. Phenol red is a naturally occurring dye that is used as an indicator. It changes color under different conditions. Because phenol red is a solution of the dye dissolved in water, it is actually composed of two substances. Thus, water must be considered as the fourth substance, variable, in the overall reaction, and its effect should also be examined. You'll find the purpose statement in the experiment overview section. The purpose of this experiment is to make observations about the changes that occur when several substances are mixed, and to design controlled experiments to identify the substances responsible for the observed changes. In Part A of this lab experiment, you'll be studying the overall reaction, but there's some changes that I'd like you to note in the amounts of the chemicals that we will use. Instead of 1 teaspoon of calcium chloride, we will use 1/2 of a teaspoon. Instead of 1/2 of a teaspoon of sodium bicarbonate, we'll be using 1/4 of a teaspoon. And instead of 5 milliliters of phenol red, we'll only be using 2.5 milliliters of phenol red. When you get to Part B of this lab, the controlled experiments, you will continue to only use half of the amounts recommended in the original lab report. You will be doing this chemical reaction inside of a sealed Ziploc baggie, and it's important to keep the three chemicals separated until you have the bag completely evacuated of air and sealed with the Ziploc zipper. So this picture is meant to show you that in the corners of the bag, A and B, that's where you'll be putting your solid chemicals, and C is where you'll be placing the phenol red. So the first thing you'll do is put in 1/2 teaspoon of the calcium chloride in one of the corners. Then you'll be putting 1/4 teaspoon of sodium bicarbonate in the other corner. And then you'll be putting 2.5 milliliters of phenol red near the top of the bag, near the top where the zipper is. You will have measuring spoons to measure the quantities of calcium chloride and sodium bicarbonate. But because this is 2.5 milliliters is such a small quantity of volume, we're going to estimate that volume by only filling the pipette bulb about half full of phenol red, like you see in this picture here. This is what the Ziploc baggie should look like after you've put in the two solids into the corners of the bag, and as you are putting the phenol red into the flat, or into the Ziploc bag as it is laying flat on the table. You'll want to make sure you push all the air out, and then you'll want to make sure that you seal that Ziploc completely. Before you allow the three chemicals to mix, now's a good time to make observations of the three substances that you have in this bag. You can see here data table A is for the overall reaction. You are to describe the properties of the individual substances, the calcium chloride, the sodium bicarbonate, and the phenol red. Okay. You should include color, texture, state of matter, things like that. Once you have these observations recorded, you will then allow all three chemicals to mix into one corner of the bag, and you'll record your observations here, what happens when the substances are mixed together. You will want to take note of any color changes, if there's any gas produced, or if there is any temperature changes. And of course you'll be recording all of this into your lab notebook, not into the actual lab manual. This part of the data table right here corresponds to procedural step number 9, which says that you are to think of at least 4 questions that could be investigated to determine the interactions that are responsible for the observed changes that you noted here. For example, is water or a liquid necessary for the reaction to occur? Write your questions in this space here in this part of the data table. Cleanup is very simple. Please make sure you rinse your baggies out into the sink and all of the chemicals can be flushed down the drain. Throw out your baggies into the garbage and wipe down your counters. That's it for procedural steps. Make sure you ask your teacher if you are continuing on with procedure part B, and you'll have to ask your teacher which post-lab questions to report on and what you'll need to do for the remainder of your lab report.